Whether or not to do a Roth conversion can seem pretty straightforward. It can seem as simple as asking, will I be in a higher tax bracket in the future or will I be in a higher tax bracket today? But in practice, there's actually far more nuance that goes into whether or not you will actually be in a higher tax bracket in the future than most people realize. And if you aren't aware of that nuance, you may end up converting the wrong amount, and you and your family could pay hundreds of thousands of dollars more in taxes than you otherwise would need to. So today we're going to walk through three areas of nuance that most people aren't even familiar with. Okay, the first one is something that's really foundational to retirement income planning, and that's that your taxable income isn't going to stay in the same place through the course of retirement. It is going to move as retirement progresses. So, to start, I'd like to take you through the typical tax arc that most people will follow through the course of retirement. In your pre retirement years, you're probably in your highest income earning years, which means you're probably in your highest tax years as well. But then when you retire, you're going to trade tax efficient income sources for more tax efficient retirement income sources, such as Social Security, such as withdrawals from brokerage accounts, perhaps rental income from rental properties. And as a result, even if you're targeting the same amount of take home income, your taxable income might be a fraction of what it would have been prior to retirement. And it's because of that that we call the early retirement years the earnings trough of retirement. But your income won't stay there forever. It's going to move because at age 73 or 75, depending on your birth year, you'll be forced to take required minimum distributions from your traditional retirement account balances. And if you've accumulated a significant 401k or IRA, those RMDs could cause your income to spike to levels that are significantly higher than you would need to sustain your lifestyle. Now, more income than you need is a good problem to have, but that can have substantial tax consequences because those RMDs are taxed as ordinary income, and they can cause you to pay taxes in a much higher marginal bracket than you would otherwise need to. So that trough, that period between pre-retirement and required minimum distributions is probably the lowest your taxes will be for the rest of your life. And that window isn't going to stay open forever. It's going to close, and it happens to be a great opportunity to consider some tax planning. And that's where Roth conversion strategies come into the fold. You can use Roth conversions to shift assets from pre tax buckets to after tax buckets where they will grow tax free and can be withdrawn later in retirement tax free. Yes, if you do a Roth conversion, you're going to increase the amount of taxes that you pay this year. But if you do Roth conversions during that earnings trough, you're going to increase your taxes when you're in lower marginal brackets. And that means your RMDs will be smaller, those forced withdrawals will be smaller when you're in higher marginal brackets in the future. And this is something that goes in the opposite direction of traditional tax advice. The traditional tax advice is focused on reducing taxes to the lowest levels possible today and deferring taxes as long as possible. Our approach is focused on reducing your total lifetime tax bill. And you can see here how if you're able to look past this year and if you're able to think about taxes and tax planning over the long term, you could see how recognizing some income when you're in lower income tax years so that you're not forced to recognize as much income when you're in higher marginal tax years, you could see how that has the potential to substantially reduce your total lifetime tax bill. The second reason is one that most people tend to underestimate. And that's because they think about their tax brackets as something that only changes when their income changes. But that's not necessarily the full picture. In some cases, your income can stay exactly the same and tax brackets can still move. Let me show you what I mean. Anytime I'm reviewing a retirement income plan with a couple, it's almost inevitable that one member will look at the projections and turn to me and say, "Hey, Bobby, this looks great, but what happens to my spouse if something were to happen to me?" When one spouse passes, the surviving spouse transitions from joint filing brackets to single filer status. And that means they're going to hit higher marginal tax brackets much quicker than they otherwise would have. For example, if you were in the 12 or 22% brackets when you were married filing jointly, you might be in the 24 or even the 32% bracket as a single filer. So you can see how even if income doesn't change, taxable income might be substantially higher, meaning that you'd pay much more in taxes as a single filer. And that's where Roth conversions can be helpful. To the extent that you've done Roth conversions during your joint lifetime, those dollars were taxed at joint filer brackets. And if God forbid a spouse passes, the surviving spouse has that after tax bucket that they can fall back on. But a change in filing status isn't the only reason that tax brackets can change. It's possible that an act of Congress can change tax brackets in the future. And if you're somebody that believes that budget deficits and record levels of national debt are unsustainable, this might be something worth paying attention to. Now, nobody knows where tax brackets will be in the future. They could be higher, they could be lower. Nobody can know for sure. But what we do know is that tax brackets are at historically low levels today. And so the cost of conversion is relatively cheap when we compare that to history. Because of that, you can think of Roth conversions as a form of tax insurance, and you are protecting against the risk of a change in tax brackets in the future. And like any other form of insurance, the very best possible outcome is to have some and not need it. It's possible that your tax filing status never changes. It's possible that taxes do not go up in the future. In fact, it's possible that taxes go down. But by doing some, you have the peace of mind of knowing that you prepared for that risk. And again, nobody knows where tax brackets will be in the future, but if you look at tax brackets today and compare them to historical levels, you might say the cost of that insurance, the tax cost of doing some conversions, might be relatively cheap. The third consideration I want you to think about is who's inheriting your IRA. And this is an area that has changed significantly with changes in the tax law over the last few years. Under the old rules, a non-spouse beneficiary who inherited your IRA could stretch out the distributions and as a result stretch out and defer the tax liability over the course of their entire lifetime. And that could be 20, 30, 50 years or more. And so you had what everybody wanted. You had the ability to defer taxes for a very, very long time. But now under the Secure Act, most non-spouse beneficiaries have to distribute an IRA over the course of 10 years. Now let's think about who's typically inheriting an IRA. It's an adult child in their 40s, 50s, or 60s who is probably in their highest income earning years. So let's say you have a high income earning child who's inheriting your $2 million IRA. They have 10 years to distribute that IRA, meaning let's say they're taking $200,000 of withdrawals every year, taxed as ordinary income, on top of the high wages they're already earning. So you can see how a change in tax rules has caused the traditional IRA to change from being one of the most tax efficient vehicles to one of the most tax inefficient vehicles for transferring wealth to children. Now, a Roth IRA changes that completely. Roth IRAs are inherited ordinary income tax free. Beneficiaries still have the same 10-year window to deplete the account, but they can let those assets stay in the account and grow tax free for that entire 10-year period before ultimately being withdrawn tax free. Now, look, beneficiaries paying taxes on inherited accounts is certainly a good problem to have. But with that said, here's the shift in thinking that I want you to consider. When you're thinking through whether or not you want to do a Roth conversion, don't just compare your tax liability to today to your projected liability in the future. Also consider your beneficiary, and this can go both ways. For example, if a charity is going to inherit your IRA, charities pay 0% taxes, so you probably shouldn't do Roth conversions. But if, on the other hand, you plan on leaving your IRA to high income earning children, then to the extent you have the tax appetite, it could make sense to consider some Roth conversions over time. So this is a fundamentally different way of thinking through Roth conversions. And for some families, it could change decisions entirely. So as we wrap up, while will I pay more in taxes in the future than I am today can seem like a simple question, I hope you can now see the nuance that goes into whether or not you actually will pay more in taxes in the future than you do today. And the better you understand that nuance and the better you're able to apply it to your situation, the better equipped you will be to make decisions around Roth conversions and converting the right amount, not too much and not too little. I hope this video was helpful. If any of what we talked about today resonates with you and you'd like to talk about how it applies to your situation, visit us at hapfinancial.com. Thanks so much for watching.